All right, so for this section of lesson 4, we're going to talk about the complications of diabetes and some of the conditions that can develop because of diabetes and the complications that can lead to continued deterioration in the individual. But why do individuals have these complications? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, they have a reduced ability to heal. And it's due to a reduced ability by the white blood cells in the blood to remove bacteria. So in diabetes, individuals, their immune system is compromised and their white blood cells are not able to clear the blood of bacteria, so it's able to manifest and wounds can fester into something that can lead to infection or even worse into serious conditions. The other reason why they have a reduced ability to heal is a reduction in the amount of oxygen to a wound due to a destruction of blood cells by the process of glycation. So what that basically means is that the capillaries, the small blood vessels that feed the tissues of the body, are destroyed by these things called advanced glycation end products, which we'll talk more about at the end of lesson 5. But essentially what these do is it's a protein and a glucose molecule that come together and they start to destroy the capillaries that feed the various tissues of the body. And therefore that tissue can no longer get oxygen-rich blood, and that tissue then will die, or at the very least their healing ability will be reduced. And we're going to show what happens in the subsequent slides with this reduced and diminished ability to heal in people with type 2 diabetes. So the first is neuropathy, which is really a disease and damage to the nerve fibers. And individuals that suffer from this have a loss of sensation in their extremities, especially in their toes, their feet, and their hands. And the idea, what happens with this individual with the neuropathy is their nerve fibers are damaged because the capillaries that feed the nerves are destroyed and there's no new oxygenated blood that gets to the nerves, and therefore they die. And now your nerves and the feet and the toes and the fingers are reduced, and they lose now their ability to feel. Here's what happens with neuropathy when individuals have a reduced ability to heal. What ends up happening is they have not only do they can't feel anything, but also their body has a reduced ability to heal. This is an indication of someone whose their foot was not able to heal very, very well at all. We're going to watch a video here that talks about neuropathy and how people can help prevent some of those complications with it.
A common complication caused by prolonged high blood glucose levels is nerve damage, known as diabetic neuropathy. Nerves are found throughout your body. They are responsible for everything you feel, from warmth and cold to pain. They also play a vital role in controlling your heart rate, digestive system, bladder control, and sexual function. Small blood vessels provide nerves with nutrients and oxygen required to survive and function. Your nerves are extremely sensitive to any change in their oxygen and nutrient supply. Damage to these small blood vessels occurs when blood, containing high levels of glucose, travels through them on its way to feed your nerves. When the small blood vessels are damaged, a sufficient supply of nutrients and oxygen no longer reaches the nerve, causing the nerve to become damaged and eventually die. The first sign of nerve damage occurs in the feet. It might feel like numbness, tingling, or burning. If left untreated, it can lead to complete loss of feeling and spread to other parts of the body. The area of the body most often affected by nerve damage is the feet. Small injuries such as a blister can be undetected due to loss of feeling. Left untreated, these injuries can become infected and in severe cases require amputation. To prevent injuries from progressing, it is important to conduct regular foot exams. This will not require much time and will help injuries from becoming serious.
So that video showed how the development of neuropathy and the complications in individuals having to do foot checks to make sure that there's no infections or cuts or scrapes or anything that might occur that can cause something like this to happen in somebody. Here's another example of a diabetic foot infection, where an individual may have gotten cut or scraped and failed to heal properly. Some other examples I'm working on in a hospital for diabetics. One individual ended up having a nail stuck in their foot for several days. They did not even know it because they had lost so much feeling in their feet. Another person had to have their foot amputated after stepping on a Lego. It got infected, and by the time they were able to catch it, the individual lost their foot. So it's very important for individuals who have neuropathy to make sure they do foot checks, make sure there's no type of cut that could develop into something like this. Take a moment here and let's read this, making sure that you have a good understanding of this situation of an individual who developed some foot complications. Okay, so you can see that the individual was wearing some shoes, brand new shoes. It started out as just a little of a redness. As you can see here, here's a video or a timeline of what the individual did when they showed he wore some new shoes, and it slowly progressed into something very serious over a 10-day period. The individual was able to have surgery, get rid of the infection, and then they lost weight, and a few years later, the individual's foot looks like this. But it just goes to show that how something that could be so simple as such as wearing new shoes can manifest into something so severe. Here's an example of another injury. This toe has most likely died with a black tissue. It's an indication of death of tissue. Here's a cut that indicated happened where it started here. The skin was cut. Poor healing. You can see now the skin here is starting to be torn away as the infection starts to set in. Here's an individual here that has a decreased ability to remove fluid from their tissues due to destruction of the lymphatic system and their blood vessels, and they start to then accumulate fluid in their tissues of the body, and you can see that quite a lot of swelling. We're going to talk about two other types of opathies: nephropathy, which is a disease of the kidney, and also diabetic retinopathy, which is disease of the eye. So we're going to look at the two different types of other opathies. All right, so this video talks about the nephropathy, or disease to the kidney. It might be a little hard to hear, so make sure you turn your volume up.
Of your body, including your kidneys. The kidneys are two bean-shaped organs located near the spine at the small of the back. They perform several important functions. One important function is to clean the blood by removing harmful waste products. The kidneys also remove water and electrolytes. Together, the harmful waste products, water, and electrolytes make urine. Having high levels of sugar in the blood can damage the blood vessels that bring oxygen and nutrients to the kidneys. Having high levels of sugar can also harm the kidney cells. This makes your kidneys have to work even harder. When this happens, the waste products that the kidneys usually filter out start to build up in the blood. This is called kidney failure. Sometimes the kidneys will even stop working if the sugar level has been too high for a long time. This is called end-stage kidney disease. With end-stage kidney disease, most, if not all, of the waste products, water, and electrolytes normally removed as urine stay in the blood. Without treatment, this can lead to life-threatening problems or even loss of life. There are some things that you can do to help prevent or slow down kidney damage. First, you should keep your blood sugar at the best level possible. Research has shown up to a 50% decrease in both the development and progression of kidney disease in people whose blood sugar was well controlled. You should also see your healthcare provider for regular checkups. During this time, make sure to ask how much protein you should be eating. High-protein diets can be harmful to the kidneys in people with diabetes. Your healthcare provider also may recommend certain types of blood pressure medicine that can help protect your kidneys. Finally, your healthcare provider should check your urine at least once a year. This test will see how well your kidneys are working and if there is any damage. Doing these 5 things will help you and your kidneys stay healthy.
All right, so that was an overview of nephropathy, the disease of the kidney, how the kidney is destroyed or damaged by the high glucose value or levels, and then how that then can manifest into even more problems. So again, people who have jaundice or discoloration of their body can be an indication that they're starting to have jaundice that's setting in. So this next video we're going to talk about is retinopathy, or disease of the eye, which people suffer quite a bit potentially who are having diabetes. So let's watch the video and then we'll talk about it in just a minute.
Diabetic eye disease refers to a group of eye problems that can occur as a result of diabetes. Without diagnosis and treatment, diabetic eye disease can cause severe vision loss or even blindness. Diabetic retinopathy is the most common diabetic eye disease and is a leading cause of blindness in persons with diabetes. It is caused by changes in the blood vessels of the retina. The retina is the light-sensitive tissue at the back of the eye. A healthy retina is necessary for good vision. In some people with diabetic retinopathy, blood vessels of the retina may swell and leak fluid or blood. In other people with diabetes, abnormal new blood vessels grow on the surface of the retina. At first, diabetic retinopathy may not cause any changes in vision, but over time, diabetic retinopathy can get worse. At first, a person might see spots floating in their vision, or may notice a general blurring of vision. Eventually, diabetic retinopathy may cause vision loss and even blindness. Diabetic eye disease.
So this is an indication of how poor disease eye or damage to the eye by high glucose levels can cause blindness. In fact, there was an individual that I took care of. He was going to work. He ended up becoming blind spontaneously, and what they found out was he was drinking about 50 2-liter bottles of soda every week. So his blood sugar was so high that it was causing a lot of damage to his eye. And then one day he ended up becoming acutely blind. He was rushed to the hospital. They were able to get his blood sugars down, and he was able to regain his eyesight. But this is just one example of the complications of what could happen with individuals with high blood sugar suffering from diabetes. Another thing to look at for when you're working with people with diabetes is a condition called acanthosis nigricans. And essentially what that means is it's a darkening of the skin at the folds. So like behind the neck, behind your knee, and your elbow. And the idea is that individuals, 90% of individuals or children with type 2 diabetes have this type of dark pigmentation. So if you're working with a client who has this darkening of the skin or in their neck, in their arms, for example, right here, or behind their knees, it could be an indication that the individual is suffering from diabetes. Here are some of the causes of death in people with diabetes. It ranges a lot of cardiovascular diseases, but you can see that a lot of individuals, or a lot of cardiovascular complications are associated with diabetes. Again, you don't need to memorize these numbers just to show the implications of diabetes. Here's an individual, what they studied out to about 80 months or so, about 5 to 6 years. What they noticed is they took a group of individuals who were non-diabetic and they followed them to see if they would have a reoccurring, what would happen after a heart attack, or individuals who had a heart attack but were diabetic. And what they found is individuals who were diabetic had a greater mortality if they were diabetic and suffering from a heart attack versus someone who suffered from a heart attack but was non-diabetic, indicating again the consequences of suffering from diabetes and long-term cardiovascular risk associated with it. Here's increased congestive heart failure, which is just a condition that builds up fluid in the heart and the lungs, can be fatal over time. And what they showed here is the number of cases of individuals that with diabetes and without diabetes. And again, you can see that individuals with diabetes had a greater incidence of congestive heart failure versus those that did not. Here's a 7-year incidence of fatal and non-fatal myocardial infarction. And this is divided into non-diabetics and diabetics. And this just shows that after 7 years, the chance of someone who never had a prior myocardial infarction, the chance of developing a MI in that 7-year period was only about 4%, versus a non-diabetic who had a prior MI, and in those 7 years, about 19% of those developed a second heart attack. Now contrast that to a diabetic here who no prior MI, individual had the chance of having a heart attack was about 20%. So this is about the same chance of someone who had a prior MI but who was non-diabetic. Now look at this. This bar shows the individuals who have had one heart attack and the chance of them having another heart attack within 7 years following the first one. You can see almost half of individuals who are diabetic who have already had one heart attack that will have a second heart attack. So it's very imperative that people who are suffering from diabetes and they've had a heart attack, or even if they haven't had a heart attack, that they try to get their blood sugar under control. The total cost of diabetes is astounding, almost $200 billion in medical costs. All right, so let's take a moment and pause the video and let's do these questions, looking through your notes to answer these, and then we'll review them as a group. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to review this, write down the answers, and let's go ahead and check these. So what is the number of individuals with diagnosed and undiagnosed diabetes? About 24 million. Which age group has the greatest prevalence of diabetes? Again, the older population, as they develop more and more develop obesity that's associated with type 2 diabetes. What are 2 reasons why diabetics have diminished ability to heal? One is the reduced ability by white blood cells and blood to remove bacteria. The other is a reduction in the amount of oxygen to wound due to destruction of blood cells by the process of glycation. And glycation is simply the protein and glucose come together and start to destroy the capillaries of that tissue. And we'll learn more about that in lesson number 5. What is neuropathy, nephropathy, and retinopathy? Well, neuropathy is a disease of the nervous system where you start to lose sensation in your extremities. Nephropathy is a disease of the kidneys where the kidneys have reduced ability to filter out compounds, waste products in your blood. Retinopathy is a disease of the eye where you start to have buildup or start to lose sight and problems with your sight. And diabetes leads to destruction of the blood vessels nourishing these nerves. So what happens is the reasons you start to develop these conditions is the capillaries that are feeding these tissues start to be destroyed, and therefore oxygenated blood is no longer able to feed those tissues, and therefore they start to die. What is acanthosis nigricans, and what would someone with this condition have? It's again, acanthosis is a darkening in the folds of the back of the neck. So again, right here, again, you're working with a client, you notice that they have this darkening in the folds of their skin. That'd be something that could be an indication that they have diabetes. Who would be at a greater risk of MI? A diabetic without a prior MI or a non-diabetic with a previous MI? They would be about the same. All right, so I hope this was a good review. Make sure you pause and make sure you pause the video and make sure you have a good understanding of this section of lesson number 4. Again, these are just some of the key points to take away from here. Again, diabetics have an increased risk of cardiovascular events. They have an increased reduction in ability to heal, increased myocardial infarction. So these are just some of the key points of this lesson up to this point. So make sure again that you review this video, making sure that you have a good understanding of the foundation of type 2 diabetes. Once you have a good foundation of type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes, we're now going to move on to the development of how all these, how this can manifest and develop. And we're first going to talk about secretion of insulin from the pancreas, and then move on towards the effect that insulin has at the tissues.